All right, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into an absolute masterclass on taking your most ambitious fan content ideas and executing them perfectly. Specifically, we're going to build a comprehensive step-by-step guide on how to create the perfect 3D cartoon of an iShowSpeed script. From safely navigating the legal frameworks to protect your fan project, all the way to applying core animation principles to bring his crazy, chaotic energy to life, you are definitely in the right place. Let's get into it. Okay, let's dive into this roadmap. Here's our highly logical curriculum for today. 1. Legal fan content. 2. Core principles. 3. 3D physics and software. 4. Animating organic elements. And finally, 5. Planning and staging.
First up, Section 1, Legal Fan Content, Navigating Copyright for Creators.
Now, before we even open up our software to start breathing life into characters, we've got to build a safe foundation, right? Because you don't want your hard work to just disappear overnight. There's this massive question mark hanging over fan creativity: copyright. Who owns what, and what can you actually use? Well, as the legal experts at Podmore Legal point out, creators generally don't want to break the rules, they just want to understand them. And that is exactly where fair use steps in. Listen, it is not about stealing, it's about transformation. Fair use really is the bread and butter of fan creativity. If you're animating an iShowSpeed cartoon, this doctrine allows you to take his familiar streams and exhale something entirely fresh. The true heart of fair use is adding new meaning to a work, shifting its purpose in a way that brings something totally new to the table, usually driven by pure passion rather than profit.
To really wrap our heads around this, we need to contrast passive copying with active engagement. Simply ripping someone else's stream and re-uploading it? That's passive, and honestly, it's a fast track to a takedown. But active engagement? Now that is a whole different ballgame. When you animate a parody of an iShowSpeed rage moment and shift it into, say, an anime battle genre, you aren't just stealing views. You're highlighting unexpected contrasts, and you're creating a completely new vibe. The exact same goes for crafting a deep dive review video or a creative mashup. These acts of active engagement inject the required originality and critical commentary that makes your work transformative and, crucially, legally protected.
Moving on to Section 2, Core Principles, The Illusion of Life.
Now, what's really interesting about this is how mastering the legal side frees you up to master the creative side. And the ultimate creative toolkit, that comes from the classic 12 principles of animation. Let's kick things off with arguably the most important one: squash and stretch. Notice the blue sphere in the center of the slide? When gravity pulls it down, it flattens and squashes. When momentum pulls it upward, it elongates and stretches. If you're animating iShowSpeed doing one of his famous backflips or wild, erratic stream movements, this principle is exactly how you give his body that fluid, believable momentum. It actually mimics how human muscles move in motion. Just try waving your hand quickly in front of your face. Your fingers will literally appear to stretch. But here's the golden rule. Even when squashing or stretching, the overall volume and mass of the character must remain perfectly constant. No exceptions.
Next up is anticipation. Basically, every major action has 3 parts: the setup, the action itself, and the follow-through. Anticipation is that setup. It prepares your audience for what's about to happen. Think of Speed crouching down, gathering his wild energy like a coiled spring right before he jumps out of his chair, or taking a dramatic, exaggerated breath before his signature bark. That setup makes the subsequent action readable, believable, and intensely impactful.
And that brings us to follow-through and overlapping action. The core idea here is pretty simple. Nothing stops all at once. Different parts of a body, or the clothes a character is wearing, move at entirely different speeds. As the quote on the screen perfectly highlights, when Snow White starts to dance, her dress naturally drags a bit. In your 3D animation, if Speed runs and suddenly comes to a dead halt, his headset cord, his oversized shoes, or maybe an unzipped jacket are going to drag behind and settle a few frames later. This overlapping action is the absolute secret sauce for conveying true physical weight.
So, how do we actually execute this on the canvas? There are 2 foundational ways to animate. Step 1 is straight ahead animation, which is where you just animate frame by frame from start to finish. It's incredibly spontaneous, it's fresh, and it is absolutely amazing for wild, unpredictable action. But the risk? Your character's volume and proportions can slowly morph and just get totally lost. Step 2 is pose-to-pose animation. This is where you firmly organize the scene by placing the main keyframes first, and then you go back and fill in the gaps. Lead animators heavily rely on pose-to-pose to plan complex timing, and for organizing chaotic, high-energy stream moments, this is absolutely vital for ensuring ultimate clarity for your audience. Take a look at the dark silhouette on the right side of this joy pose. This brilliantly illustrates 2 more principles for us: solid drawing and appeal. Solid drawing basically means having a true mastery of 3-dimensional form, weight, and balance in space. Notice how instantly readable that silhouette is? You know exactly the emotion and the momentum of the character just by looking at that solid black shape. That clarity, when combined with the dynamic design, gives the character appeal, which simply means it captures the audience's interest and makes them actually want to watch this character move.
All right, let's jump to section 3, 3D physics and software, applying theory in Blender.
Taking those traditional, classic theories into a modern 3D workspace requires some specific software know-how. If you're animating your cartoon and you find yourself wondering, why does my animation feel so floaty? Why is the character constantly clipping through the desk? Trust me, it's a frustrating and incredibly common beginner roadblock. But the good news? The fixes are actually just very specific settings tucked inside the software's physics engine.
So here is exactly how we fix it. If you have an object, let's say it's a microphone or a headset, dropping into a scene and it just falls straight through the floor, you need to click on your floor layer and explicitly set it to collision. Next, jump into your object's physics settings and enable self-collision, so it actually interacts realistically with its own geometry. To keep track of all this in Blender, if you can't see your timeline, open up the dope sheet to track your frames. Finally, a massively helpful workflow tip. Simply press Shift plus the left arrow key to instantly reset your animation back to frame 0. You can just repeatedly play the simulation, tweak the pressure and collision settings until you find the absolute perfect frame where that dropped mic squashes against the floor.
Now let's switch gears for section 4, animating organic elements, the 2D approach.
While 3D software calculates solid gravity beautifully, let's say you want to add some, anime-style 2D rage fire burning in the background of your iShowSpeed cartoon. Erratic, natural elements like fire or water require a totally different approach than structured 3D physics. Creating a ferocious, looping 2D fire effect is really all about controlled chaos. Look at this timeline breakdown here. On frame 1, you draw the base shape using a mix of sharp corners and curves. But the absolute secret to a great fire cycle is offsetting the timing. By frame 3, you start a second bubble of fire rising up, but you deliberately don't perfectly mirror the first one. Then, by frame 6, you add a third rising bubble, making sure to introduce some intense asymmetry. Keeping your shapes unequal, odd, and uneven, and varying the speed from fast to slow is exactly what makes the animation look wild, dangerous, and organically real.
When you're animating straight ahead like this, using onion skinning so you can see your previous frames, you really have to embrace the unexpected. As the great Bob Ross used to say about painting, happy accidents happen all the time. And honestly, that term is incredibly animation-friendly. You might pinch the shape of an ember to give it a flowery look, or maybe you accidentally break a piece of the flame away a frame too early, and suddenly you realize it looks beautifully organic. Iteration is key here. Try things out, make mistakes, and let the completely erratic nature of the drawing process work in your favor.
Let's move to our final section and see how this all builds together. Section 5, planning and staging, directing the audience.
You have your legal rights locked down, you know your movement principles, and you've got your software techniques dialed in. But now you need to know how to put it all together into a coherent scene. Staging is literally the art of directing the audience's attention to exactly where it needs to be at the exact right moment. The golden rule here, only one idea should be seen by the audience at a time. Take a look at the storyboard on the left. It brilliantly uses a sequence starting with a long shot to establish the room, a medium shot to introduce the action, and then close-ups to capture the raw emotion. Paired with the guide on the right for purposeful camera movements, you ensure the busy background never competes with your animation. Every single shot, whether it's a wide shot of the streaming room or a super tight close-up on a wild reaction, must clearly communicate the mood and push the story forward.
Wow, we've covered a massive amount of ground today. You now completely understand how fair use empowers your fan creativity. You know exactly how to give characters weight and appeal using squash, stretch, and overlapping action. You know how to stop objects from just floating into the abyss in Blender, and you know how to iterate through 2D happy accidents to create wild organic fire for those high rage moments. But most importantly, you know how to stage it all so your audience is utterly captivated. So, my final question to you is this. You have the tools, the foundation, and the knowledge. What world are you going to build first? Get out there, start experimenting, and let your imagination run absolutely wild. Thanks so much for joining me in this explainer, and I seriously can't wait to see what you create.